For those of you who know me, you know that I am not too shy to call out other YouTube lawyers when I feel that their internal bias has affected their analysis of a situation, and today is no different. Today I am calling out... What the... Viva Frei, Montreal litigator turned YouTuber, and I do these things called vlogs, which are sort of explanations of things that are going on in the world in terms that can be understood by lawyers and non-lawyers alike. And it's a delicate balance to walk at times, because while you want to get things right and you want to be detailed, you don't want to go into too much detail, have every video be 30 minutes long, and lose people out of boredom. That being said, there are situations when even good faith attempts to simplify matters so that they can be concise result in inaccuracies by oversimplification. And after rewatching my vlog from a couple of days ago dealing with Ahsley Bianco, the alleged ABC leaker who was recently fired from CBS after ABC called CBS and said, hey, you have a leaker on your hands, and CBS decided to fire her after 4 days. In rewatching that video and reading a ton of the comments in the comment section, I do appreciate that I may have oversimplified that situation as relates to the questions at law and not included certain nuances that would have been better to include in the video. So here we go. My theory of that video was that Ahsley Bianco could sue CBS for wrongful dismissal, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and she could sue ABC for tortious interference with contracts. Wrongful dismissal, tortious interference with contracts, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. You can't spell Better Call Saul without CBS. I have done employment law, but I've only done employment law in Quebec. Quebec is, if not arguably definitively, a more pro-employee judicial system than pro-employer. Termination of employment is the ultimate sanction. And it is true, typically speaking, that an employer doesn't have to keep on an employee that the employer doesn't want anymore. If it wasn't at ABC's specific request, it was certainly at their nudge. ABC calling CBS and saying,
hey, you just hired a leaker from our office, maybe you want to do something about it.
She left ABC, she's fired from CBS, and she's fired in such a way that basically makes her unemployable in the industry. Can that serve as the basis for a wrongful dismissal suit against CBS?
Abso-friggin-lutely.
Now, I did preface that video with the very important caveat that my entire analysis of that situation is one of a Quebec lawyer. Quebec as a province is, for good or for bad, notoriously pro-employee as opposed to pro-employer. And that sort of set the framework for my analysis of the situation. But this is, in fact, a United States law question. I'm not exactly sure on the state, but this is a US law question. And US law is notoriously and sometimes controversially more pro-employer than pro-employee. And I should have highlighted two important details, one being probationary periods in employment contracts, and two being at-will employment, which is the state of the law in most states. And the tortious interference with contracts presupposes the existence of a contract, whereas tortious interference with business relations occurs before the formation of the contract and is the tortious interference to prevent the formation of a contract. In my initial video, I referenced the Oberlin situation as relates to tortious interference. The Oberlin situation highlights the tortious interference with business relations in that Oberlin was inciting other people not to enter into contracts with Gibson's Bakery on the basis that Gibson's Bakery was racist. So generally speaking, you have two types of tortious interference. One is with business relations, which is before a contract is formed. The other is tortious interference with contracts, which is after the contract has been formed. Both types of tortious interference require some sort of underlying tort. In the Oberlin Gibson's Bakery, it was defamation, calling Gibson's Bakery racist to incite third parties not to enter into contracts with Gibson's Bakery. In the Ahsley Bianco situation, the argument would be that ABC's interference was tortious in that it was defamatory as well, going to CBS and saying that Ahsley Bianco was the leaker. But when it comes to tortious interference with contracts, not only does there have to be an underlying tort in the tortious interference, but there has to be an incitement to breach a contract. ABC would have to come in and, on the basis of a defamatory tort, say, hey, CBS, breach your contract with Ahsley Bianco as relates to her employment. Tortious interference with contracts requires an underlying tort in the interference and an incitement to breach a valid contract. Which brings us into the second question of probationary periods and at-will employment. Probationary periods in the context of employment are exactly what it sounds like. The duration of the probationary periods can vary state by state, province by province. But the probationary period basically is just that, a period during which the employer can fire the employee because they just don't like them, the relationship is not working out. And again, this is highly jurisdictional, and the probationary periods, even to the extent that they are allowed for by law, can be done away with by way of an employment contract. I did assume that Ahsley Bianco, a 2-time Emmy Award-winning producer, did in fact have an employment contract with CBS, but we know what they say when you assume. Which brings us to the bigger issue, which is at-will employment in the United States. And the thing about at-will employment is that it varies from state to state as well. But the general idea is that in the context of at-will employment, in the absence of a contract providing otherwise, an employer can fire an employee at any time for whatever reason, with a big caveat. And I have to read one person's comment on the subject. At-will employment. Exactly what it means. The employee was not complaining of OSHA violations or other similar things. Zero chance of winning such a case. There is not such exception as spiked her scoop to the at-will employment. Idiots such as this have zero clue. Now, he may be mean, but he's not necessarily wrong, and I respond as follows. I'm not sure why you feel compelled to be insulting when trying to make an otherwise valid point. Check out the pinned comment. Also, even in at-will employment states, an employee cannot be fired for a reason that would be illegal. Also, as far as I understand it, at-will employment must be specifically acknowledged by the employee. I was perhaps wrongly taking for granted that Ahsley, an accomplished award-winning producer, had an employment contract that did not provide for at-will termination. Regardless, legitimate points that I should address in a follow-up vlog. So while at-will employment does in fact mean that the employer can hire or fire at his or her sole discretion, they are not allowed to fire for reasons that would otherwise be illegal. Racism, sexism, ageism, any form of discrimination. And from what I understand, some states include the refusal to break the law and reprisals for exercising other rights. But it is a legitimate point setting aside the manner in which that point was delivered. At-will employment states the employer can fire the employee as they see fit in the absence of a contract that provides otherwise, and provided that the firing of the employee was not done for a reason that would otherwise be illegal. And incidentally, to go further down this tangent, if the employee alleges that they were fired for an illegal reason, the onus is then on the employee to prove that this is in fact the case. So again, I was and am operating on the basis that Ahsley Bianco had an employment contract with CBS. If she indeed had an employment contract with CBS that was, say, for a term, or that did not otherwise allow at-will termination, then we do in fact have the basis for tortious interference with contracts. ABC defaming Ahsley Bianco to CBS, thereby inciting CBS to breach their contract with Ahsley. In the alternative, operating on the basis that CBS did not in fact have an employment contract with Ahsley Bianco, we can then have tortious interference with business relationships. We would have ABC defaming Ahsley to CBS, inciting CBS not to enter into a contract with Ahsley. And to go down yet another small rabbit hole which highlights the dilemma every time I make a video is how much detail should I go into in the video. From what I understand, under US law, an employee cannot be made to be unemployable. So even if Ahsley Bianco were fired from ABC, ABC could not call CBS and say, whoa, we fired her, don't hire her, because then she becomes unemployable and that becomes actionable. And setting aside whether or not she was fired by ABC, to the extent that she was fired by CBS and the manner in which she was fired, if CBS in fact publicly disclosed why they fired Ahsley, they have basically made her unemployable and they have basically committed an actionable tort. All that to say, I still stick by my original analysis or rant depending on your perspective. But if I'm being self-reflective, as I always am, my original analysis was based very much on my perspective as a Quebec lawyer. My original analysis was also based on one major presumption, which was that Ahsley Bianco in fact had an employment contract with CBS. But this is why legal opinions are notoriously difficult to give, and incidentally, nothing in this video or in anything on my channel constitutes a legal opinion. Legal opinions are notoriously difficult to formulate. They are so fact-dependent that one small fact being changed can change the entire opinion. People often write me emails or Facebook messages or DMs asking me legal questions, and they just want to know what I think. And it's an impossible request. It's almost negligent of anybody to give an opinion based on a 3-line email. The smallest of facts can change the entire opinion. At the end of the day, we will see how this plays out. I suspect we will in fact see lawsuits. And it is true that I can suffer from my own bias as much as anybody else out there. It is possible that in this case, my bias is towards the person that I think was done wrong and done wrong hard. But the tightrope that I have to walk with every video I make is how much detail do I get into. Sometimes in an attempt to keep the questions at law simplified, I can in fact be accused of having oversimplified and omitted certain relevant elements of law that I ought to have included. But I am not too proud to admit when that happens and do the required follow-ups to make sure that everyone is as properly informed as can possibly be. And that's that. If you like my content, be sure to like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, drop a comment in the comment section below, and now you know you vlog. Peace out. Booyah!